Hello, everybody, and welcome to this talk on your sensory baby, on their sensory personality. I am Meg Faure. I'm an occupational therapist with a passionate interest in little ones' sensory integration, the way in which their senses are processed in order to master their world. One of the most exciting topics that I love to speak about is how your baby's sensory personality can give you insight into so many different aspects of their behavior. So let's, without further ado, have a look at your baby's sensory personality. All right, so in order to be a confident parent, which of course is what we all are targeting, but not always getting right, and to have a happy baby, we have two contributing factors that come along. The one is you and who you are as a parent, and the other one is your baby, obviously, and that dyad that happens there. So what do you bring to the party? Well, you bring the ability to have in-tune parenting. That is to be able to focus in on your baby's sensory personality, on their communication styles, and to be able to communicate with them and interpret their behavior so that you can be really in tune with what's going on in their world. And when we are in tune parents, or reflective parents as it's called, we really are acing parenting. Now, we don't get this right all of the time. There's a lot of the time when we don't know what's going on, but that's really the goal. We want to be in tune parents, focused and engaged, and engaging with our little ones. What do our little ones bring? Well, they bring their sensory personality. They bring their own little quirky sensory personality styles to the relationship. And for us to really parent our children effectively, we want to really understand the sensory personality. I want you to see this video of twins and just how vastly different these little ones are. It's going to illustrate for us what sensory personality is all about. So what you notice here is little baby on the right has very big eyes and is terribly focused and almost slow to warm up, reticent to engage. You can see how different he is from his sibling, who is... You've got to love that laugh. Who's absolutely wanting to engage all the time. Now you can see these twins have come from the same mother, they've had the same pregnancy, and yet their sensory personalities are so completely different. So what we're going to do now is have a look at what is it that makes up the different sensory personalities. Well, as you probably know, there are 5 senses that we take in every given moment of our life: the sense of touch, sight, smell, taste, and hearing. So you know about those senses because you were taught about them at school. Probably in about grade 3, you were taught about your senses. But did you know that we've got 3 other senses that come through as well? Our sense of balance, which is located inside our inner ear. It's our vestibular system. And so we can actually know how fast we're moving, which direction we're moving. We can perceive rotation of our head, and that comes from our sense of balance. And then we have our sense of body position, which gives us a sense of where our body is in space. So when I put my arms out to the side or up like this, even with my eyes closed, I know exactly where my arms are because I've got proprioceptives in my muscles. And then we've got a sense of proprioception, which comes from our internal muscles and our organs. And that gives us a sense of how fast our heart is beating, or whether or not we need to go to the toilet, or how full or hungry we're feeling, as an example. So all of the sensory information is coming through into our brains at any given time. And it passes through an amazing relay station in our brain called the thalamus. And the thalamus then interprets this information along with other parts of the brain, interprets this information and gives us a sense of the world. So that's how our brain works. It's magical. Now, we have an incredible ability in our brains to habituate sensory information. And that sense of habituation, or that ability to habituate, is incredible in the brain. It means that as all the sensory information is coming in, some of it can be ignored. So here we have a play situation with a mom and 2 little kiddies, and you can see how busy and potentially how noisy it could be. And then we have little ones who it could result in a behavior. So you can see this little one over here is feeling very crotchety and irritable, and this one's very regulated and happy. This little one is displaying an overstimulated state. What happens is that this sense of habituation is not working very well. And so all the sensory information that is going on in their world is overstimulating them and resulting in a specific behavior. This little one is able to carry on quite happily with all of the noise and all of the conditions that are going on inside the space and habituates the sensory information really well, so they are more settled little ones. So we all have these different help filters. Some of us have a very low filter for sensory information, and others of us have a very high filter for sensory information. And if you've got a low filter for sensory information is much louder, it's much more in your face. And so a lot can be going on in space, and you can become quite overstimulated. And for those who have a very high filter for sensory information that goes on doesn't come through very loudly. It comes through very, very silently, and you don't see and hear and taste and smell everything that's going on in your environment. So these filters are tied up with that word habituation. They determine how good we are at habituating. So if you've got a high filter, you habituate really well. If you have a low filter, you might not habituate as well. And this results in our 4 different sensory personalities. So here we have on the for our high sensory filter, we have a little one who a lot can be going on in their environment, and they can be quite unaware of it. So sounds, actually they don't hear every sound necessarily. And certainly if they hear it, they can just ignore it because they're habituated. Same with the feeling of the clothes on their back. They wouldn't feel a label in the back of their clothing, and they maybe wouldn't hear a dog bark 3 houses away, and they just don't become overstimulated at all. And so these little ones are what we call our settled babies. And so our settled babies tend to have a, let's just see, where's our settled baby? There we go. Our settled baby tend to really be able to just go on without too much going on in the world and don't become fussy at all. So they tend to sleep well, they feed well, they tend to be much more easy babies. Our social butterfly, on the other hand, is a little one who also has a high filter, but at some point in their life, and it usually happens at around about 3 to 4 months, they suddenly realize, gosh, the world is a lot more interesting than I realized. And so I want to start seeking sensory information. So they start to act against that high filter. So that high filter is filtering out a lot of what's going on in their world, and they completely go against that, and they start to seek out lots and lots of sensory stimulation. So they become what we know as our sensory seekers. Now, you will know that you've got a social butterfly in 2 ways. One is that every time you walk through the shops, everybody stops and coochie-coos with your little one because they're very cute and engaging. They attract people in. But the downside is they're super exhausting. They really do kind of seek sensory information all the time, want to be honest, they're noisy, they seek. Then you've got your low filter little ones over here. And if you've got a really low filter, you might end up with being a sensitive baby. So a more sensitive baby over-responds and become very irritated by input. So that little label on the back of their clothes, in their vest, they feel it all the time. The dog barking will give them a huge fright. If somebody touches them, they might perceive it as pain. So they're much more sensitive little ones and much more emotionally labile. Some little ones act in opposition to that, and they become what we call slow to warm up. So they will eventually warm up. They are reticent when engaging because they're not sure about whether or not something is safe. So they act as if are sensitive. But as soon as they know that something's safe, so they know that a person is safe, or a taste is safe, or a smell is safe, or a texture is safe, they'll start to really engage with it. So they take time to adjust, but they do eventually adjust and respond happily to new input. And they can actually look quite like a social butterfly because they have warmed up and then they've become social butterflies. Now, these sensory personalities have an impact on feeding, and that's what we're going to be talking about today. So our settled baby tends to settle into a feeding routine really easily. So they feed well, they feed happily, and they are quite happy on the breast. They're just as happy on the bottle, and when they move on to solids, absolutely no problem. And so they tend to go with the flow. That's because all the sensory information that goes with feeding doesn't overwhelm them. So what should you be doing if you've got a settled baby? Well, you can do a rapid introduction of new flavors and textures. They become much better feeders if there's much more interesting things going on. So add cinnamon into your carrots or cardamom into their apple and porridge. Add in interesting flavors for them, and really do quite rapid introduction of solids. So you can see that they really do enjoy new and novel textures and flavors. And so you can actually spice up their life by giving them really nice, flavorful and varied foods. Your social butterfly can be a picky eater because they do not like bland food. And so bland and repetitive is boring. And so if you've got a social butterfly and you've introduced rice cereal to them, they'll eventually start to resist eating because they think rice cereal is boring. They tend to be quite good feeders until around 4 months, and then they become very distractible, especially if they're breastfeeding. So they'll be sucking away and then suddenly turn around to try and see what's going on in the world because they're so interested in the world. They are social butterflies. They often prefer solids once solids have started. So as soon as you start solids, they want to continue with solids. They don't want to go back to milk. And the reason that they don't want to go back to milk is that milk is really boring for these little ones. So they do prefer our solids as they get onto it. And so what happens is often when you introduce solids into their diet, they tend to go off milk. So they might stop wanting to drink their milk and rather focus in on their solids. But as we know, milk is the priority until 6 months of age. And so you really need to make sure that you are kind of prioritizing those milk feeds. So they bore quickly. You want to offer a really varied diet with lots of flavor and lots of exploration opportunity. And you must just understand that life is going to be messy with them because they are messy eaters for sure. Moving on to our slow to warm up baby, you can imagine novelty is a threat to them. They don't like novel sensations. They don't like novel flavors, novel textures, and everything feels like it's a threat until it's proven innocent. So they don't like surprises. So they tend to resist milk changes. So they don't like going from breast to bottle. And at the same time, they don't really like going into solids because solids present something completely new for them. And particularly if the solids is lumpy. One of the tips that I've got for you with these little ones is never to introduce shop-bought jarred food, because if you introduce jarred food, what's going to end up happening is it'll get stuck on that very smooth jar texture, whereas our home-cooked foods can never, ever be as smooth because we simply can't get it as smooth. So go straight on to home-cooked food if you can with these little ones. And then finally, with our sensitive babies, it can really be a minefield. These ones tend to be really, really tricky when they're weaning. They also can be tricky in terms of breastfeeding and bottle feeding. So they often are resistant to going onto a different type of feed. So they might start on breastfeeding and then never want to go into a bottle because they don't like the texture of the teat or the taste of the milk. And so they can be really tricky with milk feeds, but they can also be really picky eaters when it comes to solids. They don't like lumps, they don't like new textures, they don't like new flavors, and they tend to get stuck on things that are either very predictable or stuck on a white diet. So they like to have like the highly processed carbohydrates, dairy, yogurts, that type of thing, and they don't really like the highly flavorful foods. So the first thing is that these little ones are really tricky in many different aspects of their life. They tend to be more sensitive in all respects and can be a lot more fussy. So the first word of encouragement that I have for you is that you must remember it's not your fault and that you do need to be patient with them because it does take time. The other thing with them is that you don't want to get into fights with them because when you are fighting your little one when they are feeding, it increases their anxiety and then decreases the amount that they'll actually eat. And so meal times need to be made very pleasant for these little ones. Stay within their comfort zones, but at the same time, always have a little bit of a challenge going out there. So try and get them to extend the foods that they're eating so they don't have too narrow a repertoire of foods that they're focused on. So those were just a couple of little tips for you to be able to understand your baby's sensory personality, and then also for you to be able to understand how they eat in the context of that sensory personality. Now, there's a whole lot more information that you can find on this, and it's actually in a course that we've got online. You can do our weaning course or our sensory personality course, or both of them cover this in a lot of detail. And because we are being involved in this amazing little workshop from Baby Yum Yum, we're actually going to be giving everybody who's attending today a 25% discount off Kath McGaw's weaning course. So if you want to do her weaning course, which covers the sensory personalities, and you want to get 25% off that, you just need to use this code over here, BYY, all caps, 25 off. So that's an O, not a 0. So BYY 25 off, and you can get 25% off Kath's course, and you'll find it inside the Parent Sense app in the courses section. And then in addition to that, we're going to be giving 50% off a full membership to the app. So weaning is made super easy using the Parent Sense app. So go onto your app store, whether it's a Google Play Store or whether it is the iOS app store, go and have a look for the Parent Sense app. Go and download it. And then go onto our website and make sure you do it on our website, and you can get a 50% off a lifetime subscription by putting in the code BYY50 and then O off. BYY50 off, and you can get 50% off a lifetime subscription to the Parent Sense app. So I hope what I've shared with you today sheds a little bit of insight on your baby's sensory personality and how it pertains to feeding. If you want more information, do the courses, either the Sensory Baby course, which is on the app down here, or Cat's Weaning course. Both of them would cover this off beautifully. So thank you very much for your time, and I wish you lots of luck and enjoyment and delight with your little ones as you parent them. Thank you very much.